Let's have a brief look at how strata form. So the formation of strata of rocks. All right, have a look at this diagram. You've seen this one before. Notice that the sediments that are forming at the bottom of the sea are forming in layers, and these layers are called strata. So that's the first thing. The layers of sediment are called strata. Now, the very bottom layers must be deposited first. Okay, you can't lay something, you can't put a sheet onto a bed unless you've got the bed first, right? So everything has to, thanks to gravity, we have to build up these layers from the bottom first. Okay, build up the strata from the bottom first. Okay, so the ones on the bottom were deposited first and are therefore oldest, and newer layers are laid down on top of these older ones. And as the diagram clearly says, over time, the very bottom layers get cemented into rock. So the rocks that form from the strata of sediment are the same. The oldest rocks are on the bottom, and the youngest rocks are on the top. Okay? Now, different types of sediment will lead to the formation of different types of rock. Okay, so depending what's happening on the land, that will dictate what sediments it is that are washing into the sea and settling on the bottom of the sea. All right, so if the land is very mountainous, then the sediment that is coming off of those mountains is going to be very coarse, great big thick pebbles and gravel, for instance. And so you'll get a layer of sediment that forms from quite a chunky, pebbly kind of looking rock. So the rocks are made of pebbles and gravel that are obviously cemented together. Now, millions of years go by, and these mountains are worn down into a swamp. Now, because on the land there is a swamp which has very, very slow-moving water, the water that carries the sediment into the sea will be bringing sediment that's more like mud. All right, so we've already put down one layer of very, very coarse material. And the layer that's come down on top of it millions of years later is a layer of very fine material called mud, right? Really, really fine. And that will make a totally different kind of a rock. And this happens over many, 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 many millions of years. And that means that we get bands in the rock like this. This is a really good example. You can see how incredibly stripy this rock is. This is a rock that formed under a seabed many, many, many millions of years ago. And then the sea has evaporated or run off, and the rock has been thrust up out of the earth so that we can see what was once a sea floor. And you can see that the rocks are banded. You can see the different colors. Those are different types of rocks. And the reason that the rocks are different types is that the sediments that formed those rocks were different types. And the reason the sediments were different types is that different things were going on the land adjacent to this sea at the time that these rocks were forming. So the colored bands that you see running horizontally across the face of this rock are called strata. And the strata had to form from the bottom up. So the very oldest layers of the strata are right down the bottom, and the very youngest layers, the very youngest strata, are right up the top on that ridge line. So the bottom one is kind of a gray color in this photo. There's a bit of a red to it, a bit of a grayish red, whereas the very top strata, the very youngest strata, is more of a yellowy orange or a golden orange. And that's how layers form in rocks, how strata forms, the same way that sedimentary rocks do, but you get layer upon layer upon layer upon layer over many, many millions of years. That's all there is to it.